The Redemption Files presents The Art of Moving On, an audio drama of love, romance, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. Read by Abby Turner. Chapter 1. Eleanor Wexley had always been the sort of woman who could hold a grudge with the same tenacity as a Victorian-era governess clutching a family secret. It wasn't that she was vindictive. No, she simply had a finely tuned memory for slights, betrayals, and the absurdities of human nature. And if life had taught her anything in her 30 years of existence, it was that people were often absurd. She lived in a modest but tastefully decorated flat in Oxford, where she split her time between editing literary manuscripts and excelling at passive-aggressively watering her neighbour's half-dead ficus whenever he left town. It was a quiet life, punctuated by the occasional misadventure in dating and the endless supply of tea that her best friend, Marla, insisted would one day solve all of life's problems. The trouble began, as trouble so often does, with a man. Specifically, a man with a disarming smile, a fondness for quoting poetry at inopportune moments, and a talent for making women believe that they alone were special. His name was Henry Davenport, and for a time, Eleanor had allowed herself to believe the lie that love could be simple. Henry was, in many ways, the perfect English romantic lead. Charming, brooding when necessary, and blessed with a jawline that made Renaissance statues look underwhelming by comparison. He had courted Eleanor with the sort of effortless grace that suggested either deep sincerity or long-term practice. She had, in her cautious way, resisted at first, but resistance was difficult when he turned up at her favourite bookshop with first editions, or when he remembered how she took her tea without ever needing to be told. For a year, she had allowed herself to be happy. She had ignored the quiet warnings in the back of her mind, the ones that told her no one was that perfect. And then, quite on schedule, the truth arrived, neatly wrapped in the form of an unfortunate email left open on his laptop. The details were banal in their predictability. Another woman, another set of whispered promises, another heart left to mend itself. Eleanor had spent precisely one evening in dignified despair, drinking wine and listening to moody French jazz as though starring in her own melancholic indie film. By morning, she had resolved that Henry Davenport would not be the defining heartbreak of her life. No, she would not become a woman who lost herself in tragedy. Instead, she would become something far more dangerous, a woman with a plan. And so, with the precision of a general preparing for battle, she set about reclaiming her life. She accepted an invitation to a literary conference in Edinburgh, where she met an author whose wit matched her own. She took up fencing partly as a metaphor, partly as an outlet. And most importantly, she did not allow herself to hate Henry, for hate was too consuming and too predictable. Instead, she stored him away in the recesses of her mind as a lesson learned, a beautifully bound but ultimately disappointing novel. But love, as it turned out, was not quite done with her. Redemption, after all, often arrives in the least expected of places, and for Eleanor Wexley, it arrived in the form of an old flame, a missed opportunity, and the realization that sometimes the best kind of love is the one that takes its time. The story of Eleanor was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Chapter 2. A City of Second Chances. Edinburgh had a particular kind of charm that made Eleanor feel as though she had stepped into a novel. One of those slow-burning, evocative stories where the weather was perpetually misty and every cobblestone had a tale to tell. It was a city built for new beginnings, or, at the very least, temporary escapism. She had arrived at Waverley Station, armed with 2 suitcases, a battered leather satchel, and a firm resolution to leave Oxford and everything associated with it far behind her, if only for a while. The literary conference was as good an excuse as any. A week surrounded by fellow lovers of words, whiskey, and the occasional passive-aggressive debate about the superiority of Austen over Bronte was precisely the distraction she needed. Marla had insisted on booking her accommodation, a charming, if slightly eccentric, guest house run by an elderly woman named Agnes, who seemed to regard Eleanor as a long-lost granddaughter upon arrival. "You look like a woman in need of a proper Scottish breakfast and a stiff drink, dear," Agnes had said the moment she opened the door. before ushering Eleanor inside with a forcefulness that suggested resistance was futile. Eleanor had only just begun unpacking when her phone buzzed. A message from Marla. Marla, Edinburgh suits you. Try not to get into any existential crises before dinner. Eleanor smirked before responding. Eleanor, no promises. Also, Agnes has already adopted me. Send help. She set her phone aside and sighed, glancing at herself in the mirror. New city, new chapter. And if she played her cards right, perhaps even a little bit of redemption. That evening, she attended the opening night of the conference, an event that promised literary insights but delivered an open bar, an equation that often led to impassioned discussions and, on at least one occasion, an impromptu duel with quills. It was there, balancing a glass of wine in one hand and her dignity in the other, that she heard a voice she had not expected. Eleanor Wexley, as I live and breathe. She turned, and there he was, James Sterling, the one that got away, or rather, the one she had walked away from years ago, when timing and pride had conspired against them. Of course, fate had a sense of humour, and Eleanor, it seemed, was about to be its favourite punchline. Chapter 3. The Weight of Unspoken Words. James Sterling had aged infuriatingly well. His hair had settled into an artful disarray of dark waves, flecked with just enough silver to suggest wisdom rather than weariness. His eyes, still that impossible shade of green, carried the same unreadable expression she had once loved and loathed, in equal measure. Eleanor recovered quickly, straightening her shoulders. James, fancy meeting you in a place filled with books and unresolved literary debates. He chuckled, low and warm. I suppose we were always destined to haunt the same corners of the world. She took a measured sip of her wine. And what brings you to Edinburgh? A newfound appreciation for bagpipes? An urgent desire to settle the Brontë versus Austen debate once and for all? A keynote speech, actually. But now that you mention it, I might stay for the bagpipes. Eleanor's stomach did an ill-advised somersault. Of course, he was a keynote speaker. He had always been brilliant, after all. Too brilliant, sometimes. And now, fate had delivered him neatly back into her life, like a plot twist she hadn't asked for. James studied her, the weight of their history settling between them, like an unopened letter. It's good to see you, Eleanor. She tilted her glass toward him in a silent toast. Let's see if you still think that by the end of the week. Chapter 4. The past never stays buried. Eleanor had once believed that time dulled certain wounds, sanding them down into memories so faint they could be dismissed as fiction. But standing before James Sterling, she realized how foolish that notion had been. They were seated at a quiet corner table, the din of the literary crowd muffled by the heavy oak panelling. The air between them crackled with the ghosts of unsaid things, and for a moment, neither spoke. So, James said finally, his voice edged with curiosity, how have you been? Eleanor exhaled, swirling the wine in her glass. Oh, you know, editing novels, overwatering plants, leaving behind dramatic heartbreaks like breadcrumbs through the literary world. The usual. He smiled, slow and knowing. And how's the grudge holding these days? Still a refined art? She smirked. Some things never change. Chapter 5. The Quill and the Dagger. The Edinburgh rain fell in sheets, blurring the city's Gothic spires into smudges of charcoal. Eleanor sat in the guest house's parlour, her laptop balanced on her knees, half editing a manuscript about a 19th century forgery scandal, and half listening to Agnes hum Auld Lang Syne while dusting porcelain spaniels. The scent of shortbread lingered, a buttery comfort against the storm. James had texted an hour earlier, cared to debate Bronte's moral ambiguity over coffee, and Eleanor, ever the strategist, had replied with a nonchalant, only if you're prepared to lose. Now, she traced the rim of her teacup, rehearsing arguments in her head. It was easier to fixate on literary quarrels than to dissect why her pulse quickened at the thought of him. Their meeting place was a cafe tucked beneath the shadow of the Scott Monument, its windows fogged with warmth. James arrived late, hair damp, a leather-bound copy of Wuthering Heights under his arm. "Apologies," he said, sliding into the booth. "I was held hostage by a poet arguing that iambic pentameter is a capitalist construct." Eleanor arched a brow. "And you didn't stage a rescue mission?" "I considered it, but he was armed with a sonnet." He flagged down a waiter, ordering 2 espressos. "Shall we begin?" "Heathcliff. Villain or victim?" "Both," she said, leaning forward. "Bronte doesn't deal in absolutes. He's a product of cruelty, but he perpetuates it, like a fire that's both warmth and destruction." James's eyes gleamed. "Aren't we all?" The words hung between them, charged. Eleanor glanced away, her gaze catching on a man outside, tall, broad-shouldered, his profile achingly familiar. Henry. Her breath hitched. Impossible. He was in Oxford, likely charming some unsuspecting soul with Keats and contrived vulnerability. "Eleanor," James's voice softened. "You've gone pale." She shook her head. "Just a ghost." Chapter 6. Subtext and Sabres. The fencing hall was a cathedral of clashing steel, its air sharp with sweat and determination. Eleanor adjusted her mask, grip tightening on her foil. Marla had once quipped that her hobby was aggressively avoiding therapy, but here, amidst the parries and lunges, Eleanor found clarity. Her opponent, a wiry Scotsman named Callum, smirked. "Ready to eat lemonade, lass?" "Only if you're serving humility," she shot back. Their bout was a dance of feints and ripostes. Eleanor's mind, however, replayed yesterday's cafe encounter. That glimpse of Henry, hallucination or harbinger. She overextended, and Callum's foil tapped her shoulder. Distracted, he tutted. "Thinking of a man?" "Thinking of skewering one," she muttered. Later, as she toweled off, her phone buzzed. Henry's name flashed on the screen. "In Edinburgh. We need to talk." Her thumb hovered. "Delete? Block?" Marla's voice echoed. "Don't let him live rent-free in your head, love," she replied. "There's nothing to discuss." His response was immediate. "I've changed." Eleanor snorted. So had the weather. It didn't mean she'd trust it. Chapter 7. Manuscripts and Misgivings. The conference's keynote address was standing room only. James took the stage, his presence commanding silence. "Literature," he began, "is the art of resurrection. We exhume the past, dress it in new syntax, and hope it speaks." Eleanor stood at the back, arms crossed. His speech wove through themes of redemption, quoting everyone from Dostoevsky to Zadie Smith. When their eyes met, he faltered, just once before concluding, "But what if the story we're revising is our own?" The applause was thunderous. Eleanor slipped out, only to collide with Henry in the lobby. "Ellie," he breathed, reaching for her. She stepped back. "Don't. I'm here for the conference. And for you." His smile was a well-practiced plea. "Give me 5 minutes. You had a year." His gaze hardened. "Is this about him, Sterling?" A chill crept up her spine. "You don't get to ask." Chapter 8. Whispers in the Vaults. Agnes's guest house had a cellar, converted into a cozy nook with tartan blankets and a crackling fire. James arrived unannounced, a bottle of whiskey in hand. "Truce?" Eleanor eyed him. "Depends. Are you here as a keynote speaker, or a ghost from my past?" "Both." He poured 2 glasses. "Henry's here." Astute observation. "He's trouble, Eleanor." She sipped the whiskey, its smoke searing her throat. "And you're not." James leaned closer. "I never claimed to be safe." The firelight caught the scar on his jaw, a souvenir from their last argument, years ago. She'd thrown a wine glass. He'd refused to dodge. "I'm not the same man," he said quietly. "Neither am I the same woman." Outside, the wind howled. Somewhere, Henry plotted, and Eleanor, ever the tactician, wondered if redemption was a choice or a collision. Chapter 9. The Duel. The conference's grand finale was a masquerade ball in the National Museum. Eleanor wore a black gown and a silver mask, her foil discreetly strapped to her thigh. Marla had insisted, "Romance or revenge, darling. Either way, look fabulous." James found her first, his mask a raven's beak. "Dance with me." They waltzed past skeletons of dinosaurs and relics of kings. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm deciding whether to stab you." He laughed. Still holding grudges? Still earning them? Henry intercepted them, maskless, his charm brittle. May I cut in? Eleanor's grip tightened on James's shoulder. No. Henry's smile faded. You'll regret this. Later, in the moonlit courtyard, James pressed a folded note into her hand. Meet me at the ruins of St. Anthony's Chapel. Bring your foil. The game, it seemed, was afoot. Chapter 10. Redemption's Edge. The chapel ruins loomed, skeletal against the night. James stood at the precipice, foil in hand. A rematch, he said. Eleanor unsheathed hers. Why? Because some things can't be said. They must be fought. Their blades clashed, a symphony of steel and suppressed longing. Eleanor thought with precision, James with recklessness. When she disarmed him, he caught her wrist. I never stopped loving you, he rasped. She froze. You left. You asked me to. The truth, sharp as a blade. She'd been afraid of his ambition, her own vulnerability. Henry's voice shattered the moment. Touching, really. He emerged from the shadows, a pistol glinting in his hand. But the hero always dies in the third act. James stepped in front of Eleanor. Run. She didn't. Instead, she lunged, not with steel, but words. Henry, you're a cliché, a footnote in someone else's story. His hand trembled. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Agnes, ever vigilant, had called them. As Henry was led away, James brushed a tear from Eleanor's cheek. Still a fighter, still a fool, she whispered, kissing him. The city held its breath. Somewhere, a new chapter began. Epilogue. The Art of Beginning Again. Eleanor's memoir, The Art of Moving On, topped bestseller lists. Critics praised its wit. Readers clung to its hope. At the launch party, James slipped a first edition into her hands. Inscribed inside, to my editor, my foil, my redemption. Always. Outside, Edinburgh's streets shimmered with rain. Eleanor smiled. The end, she realized, was just another word for continue. Thank you for listening to The Art of Moving On. We hope you enjoyed this tale of love, romance, and redemption. Join us again by liking and subscribing for more tales. Join us. This is Abby Turner. Take care.